but just in general, how in tune are you with your emotions? And if you think about a way, how do they affect others? I mean, there's a lot of ways that they do affect others. So, I mean, and that's, you could ask yourself some of these questions, I think, that would be really good to figure out, how can you be more aware of your mood and the emotions that affect your decision making? Because it does. Your emotions have a big impact on the way you make your decisions.
Yes.
So I'd like to get into a little bit of at least a more definition. And we'll talk to our listeners a little bit about more what it is. And we'll get some questions at the very end on what some things you can do to improve your level of self-awareness. So as a definition, we're talking about self-awareness. And this is all based on Daniel Goleman's model of emotional intelligence from his multiple books on this. Definitely a great resource to read as well on emotional intelligence. But he talked about self-awareness is specifically the ability to recognize and to understand your moods, your emotions, and your drives. That's it. Your ability to recognize and understand your moods, your emotions, and your drives. And so people that have mastered EQ, and I don't know, have we ever really mastered it, but on that road to mastery, they've got the self-awareness where they can observe the linkage between their thoughts and their feelings. They have that space they've kind of purchased because of the becoming aware that where they can deliberately choose how they want to react when something triggers them. And so, you can take the thoughts and you really look at it in the form of what's your attitudes, what's your beliefs, what's your expectations. And you can really create the context of how that thing that triggered you emotionally can affect your experience and how you react to other people. What are your thoughts?
So that's right on the money there, Dave. So the idea there is when we're able to start to recognize what are some of those triggers, like we mentioned a moment ago, that you can have a little bit of a dialogue within your own mind. Okay, now wait a second. So this is something that I've got some strong feelings about. Now, how might be the best way to understand what's going on here, and what might be some things I can use to respond in this situation? So in other words, it's kind of giving yourself a little quiet time within your own brain to be able to identify what's going on and to let your rational side of yourself come to some type of a solution of how you're going to respond. This is, I think, what's critical. So it's the self-awareness. You got to have that awareness first before we can actually respond to other people. And that will come more in detail when we talk about the social regulation and how we actually respond to other people. But that's one place to start with it, I believe.
No, that's true. And one thing that for everybody to remember is that emotions always precede actions. It's not the other way around. So if you're happy, you'll smile. Now, granted, there's, if you just, I'm not in a good mood, but you just kind of smile. I mean, how long can you hold a smile on your face before you're like, okay, I give up? Maybe you'll start to de-escalate you if you're upset or you're angry. But it's typically not the other way around. You don't just smile once, like, and now all of a sudden, oh man, I'm happy. No, but if you're really happy, then you just kind of smile the reaction. So a lot of things, if you think about, the emotions precede your actions. And so when you can kind of get a better control over your emotions and your emotional reaction, the better you're able to act, the better you're able to decide and make great decisions on what you're doing, and just be more productive and more efficient.
I think a good example for that, Dave, let's say, friend, you're in a meeting and a discussion is going on and there's something that comes up that is somewhat controversial. So your first or initial response might be to blurt out something that's somewhat threatening or somewhat intimidating. So if you stop, you think about that for a moment, and like you just said, you have to have that emotion first. You understand your position, what your responsibilities are, what the ultimate goal is for your team. Well, to rethink your response and how it's going to have an effect on the overall team and help that your organization reach a certain goal, that in itself can be the motivation in your own mind to respond in a way that's going to be more positive and more productive. So that's that emotion getting right on the bicycle, balanced on the bicycle, so that you can move forward in a balanced way.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And one of the books that we were researching gave a couple of examples, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Talks about, you've got a couple of guys in the park, and you got one guy that falls down and basically just cuts his arm, scrapes his arm. He's in pain. Don't get me wrong, it hurts. And then you got a guy, falls down and ends up, breaking his arm. Well, if you've broken your arm before and now say both guys fall down and cut themselves, okay. Well, the guy who's broken his arm before, who's been in a tremendous amount more pain, that, all right, I cut myself, I'm bleeding, all right, whatever, not a big deal. The one that's never done any of that before, and this shit, oh my God, it's the end of the world. It's like a paper cut, you just, oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. Well, the point ends up being the ones who have actually had the more experiences in life and been through a lot can realize, you know what? I've been through this before. This isn't the end of the world. We'll get through this and we'll be fine on the other end. And so that's why when you talk about emotional intelligence, a lot of times, folks, when we steer away from this to a certain degree in hiring, because it kind of skews to folks that have more experience. Because as you have more experience in life, you become more self-aware. And with that self-awareness, then you're able to emotionally regulate a little bit better, mainly because you're like, okay, I've done this before. World didn't end. Okay, same thing's happened again. Maybe it'll be okay.
Right. And Dave, to add to that, so that's the key here. We want our listeners to remember your emotional intelligence can be improved. So yes, in some ways, people have had experience, are a little bit older. They may have a little more emotional intelligence. But the fact is, once we're able to identify areas where we need to get better, to grow in emotional intelligence, there are some exercises, which we'll talk about, that'll help you develop your emotional intelligence faster and easier.
Well, absolutely. Well, and it's one of the things that I think is fair to say that people that have had more challenging experiences in life are probably better prepared than those who have had less challenging experience. Just because, like we were mentioning, you can scale the gravity of the situation, and that a lot of times our experiences are relative. I mean, what's overly traumatic for me may be like for you. We react to things a little bit differently, but I think typically our inner self, our inner dialogue, what's going through our own mind, it tends to skew negative, just being honest. And, if you're aware of that, you can kind of tamp down some of that negative self-talk